Believe it or not, this was happening in the background and no one was talking about it. I hope after our yesterday's video, some will start to do that. Now, in today's video, I would like to take you guys through the different proposals of central bank digital currency and how they plan to incorporate the fintechs to this level. As we see the possibility of a synthetic central bank digital currency, hybrid central bank digital currency, and a retail central bank digital currency, we need to know which one has the higher probability and how Ripple as a fintech who works with the central banks may play its role. If you are getting value out of the content, please do support the channel, hit the like button and the subscribe button followed by the bell notification icon to get notified about the future videos. Welcome to the Scientific Investor channel where we discuss crypto and science behind investing regularly. Now this one is actually from Bank of International Settlements. They're actually issuing towards the central bank digital currency and they are actually looking at any kind of technology which will actually help them to keep the movement of payments stable. Now this is an article from BBVA, and when you actually go through that, you actually get a lot of idea regarding the central banks and how they plan to do the central bank digital currency. Now when we read this is the important part in this one. Most of the central banks that analyzed the topic concluded that the risks of central bank digital currencies exceed their potential gains. Now, if you have already watched yesterday's video, we highlighted this, right? And we showed different aspects of this. Now, only Sweden and China seemed to be considering seriously to go ahead. Sweden, because cash is disappearing and electronic forms of money that are replacing it are provided by a few foreign companies. And China, because the recent explosion in the role of big tech companies in retail payments is a source of uneasiness for the regulators, which seems to see the central bank digital currency as a way to regain central degree of control. So they are actually moving towards that, and the chances for them in China is more or less a retail central bank digital currency if they are to hold the higher level of control. That is this case, direct central bank digital currency. You can see the central bank will be issuing this central bank digital currency based on the assets which they hold, and that will be directly incorporated towards the accounts or wallets of retailers. Now the issue there is the banks, which should be acting as an intermediary or other fintech players or someone, they have a direct issue there because they are being suppressed by the central bank itself. Whereas in the others, you can actually see that there is a chance for fintech players or the central bank digital currencies to play with the central other banks and fintechs. This was the situation when Libra was announced in June 2019. The possibility that Facebook, with its 2.5 billion users, issued a stablecoin that may compete with cash triggered a reaction among central banks. Now, if you remember the interview with Brad Garlinghouse just after that, he was stating the announcement of Libra from Facebook actually triggered some frenzy from bankers and central bankers because they were getting a hell lot of calls asking what they can do and how they can process this ahead, where the central banks will have their control. Now, talking about that control, this is an article from IMF. And when you actually go through this one, you actually get different perspectives about the money, central bank monies, and you reach this area, which is the synthetic central bank digital currency. Now, when I state this, keep in mind that we also have a consideration from the Bank of International Settlement where you have synthetic central bank digital currency, but along with that, they also foresee the hybrid central bank digital currency. Now, yes, there is kind of some similarities in between there. As we go further, we actually see other articles talking about this, whereas they actually call the hybrid solution itself a synthetic central bank digital currency. So yes, the further clarity need to be created there, but let's go through this one first. This is a IMF statement. A synthetic central bank digital currency is essentially a public-private partnership that encourages competition between e-money providers and preserves competitive advantages. The private sector concentrates on innovation, interface design, and client management. So remembering a couple of videos back, we actually discussed about the French government, meaning the Bank of France, coming up and stating on an interview on a stage that we are going to allow public-private partnership towards the blockchain DLT solutions. Now, remember this, synthetic central bank digital currency is essentially a public-private partnership. Now, if you really want more clarity, this is another article from the IMF itself. When you go to the IMF blog, you can actually see this there. Now, this one is like more clear. We can read this. More specifically, the synthetic central bank digital currency model envisions private sector firms issuing digital coins to the public. Read it again. More specifically, the synthetic central bank digital currency model envisions private sector firms issuing digital coins to the public, which can either be accounts or tokens leveraging DLT, which can either be accounts or tokens leveraging DLT. These firms would thus be responsible for doing what they do best. What do Ripple do? The payments, right? Innovating the interfacing with customers. The central bank instead would provide trust to the system, meaning if they are providing it based on the central bank assets or reserves, then the trust is directly delivered from the central bank by requiring that coins be fully backed with central bank reserves. Now, we talked this yesterday, right? If the remaining escrowed amount of XRP is being backed by the central bank reserves, this is happening. It's not possible. I believe that it is happening. This arrangement preserves the comparative advantage of each participant, whether it is a private sector firm or a central bank, and induces competition among private sector firms to offer attractive coins and interface. Wow, attractive coins and interface. So keeping this in mind, which is really wow moment for the XRP community, we can look at this. In this one, we can see the indirect CBDC, which is the synthetic, and this one is the hybrid. In both of them, you can actually see that the central bank digital currencies are being issued based on the assets of the central bank itself, and then there is an intermediary before it reaches the public. Now, this particular case without the intermediaries is kind of ruled out. Reason, they don't want that control unless it is China. They need complete control and they're actually looking forward to this thing. Keeping this in mind, the public-private partnership between the central bank and the e-money providers, we can actually come to this particular graph. In this one, the first side here is actually showing you the account-based central bank digital currency, and here it is actually showing you the digital tokens issued based on the central bank digital currency. So we can actually focus on this one first. And this one, as we know, currently you have a private key for your wallet, then execute if public key A shows the digital signature is correct. So this is what I foresee which is going to happen, and the chances are this is coming ahead. Now, in this article 2, they are actually talking about both, right? And as we see, as we just saw in the first article, we can see the Sweden started testing the central bank digital currency in February, and several other central banks have discussed this prospect. And this is the discussion which they have done. This is the IMF, and we can actually see that they are actually talking about this thing in detail. Now, when you actually come down of this one from BBVA, you can actually go through this area where, as regards the first topic, the IMF flagged the idea of a synthetic CBDC, which will be issued by the central bank, but in which the relationship with the customers will be retained by private companies in principal banks or fintechs, which will be issued to have a full backing of the positions in a central bank, that is 100% reserve coverage. So this is from BBVA, whereas these are from the Bank of International Settlement, and this information is directly from the IMF. So the chances are we get a direction from BBVA, but more clarity from the Bank of International Settlements and IMF. So as they are giving us, the idea is more like this. Yes, the reserves will be 100% backed by the central bank assets, but the intermediary solution will be there. Now, to get more details, we can actually go through another side of the same article from the blogs of IMF, which is about the DLT. So when we actually read through this, you can directly get that they are actually looking at DLT solution for DLT based assets. So there are assets which they consider from the distributed ledger technology. If these assets, DLT based currency, would facilitate automatic payments when assets are delivered, so-called payment versus delivery or payment versus payment, which could be automated using smart contracts. Now I can see why the smart contracts platform, which is delivered currently by Ethereum and Ripple both, is being highlighted. Mostly when the banks and central banks are actually discussing with Ripple. Previously they were high just on the payments area, whereas now the Codius is kind of pushing towards smart contracts area for Ripple itself. So yes, the possibility is there, it can be through XRP and Ripple. Even if it's not, it can be through Ethereum network, and towards the bank it will be coming in an interledger protocol, so which will be again through XRP. And this area will not be actually good for many other tokens. Say this is countering the new digital currencies. Some central banks view central bank digital currency as healthy, potentially necessary competition against privately issued digital currencies, some of which may be denominated in foreign currencies. These central banks believe a domestically issued digital currency backed by the government, denominated in domestic unit of account, would help prevent the adoption of privately issued currencies, which may be difficult to regulate. That's why they are actually adopting fintechs which can be regulated and using their assets, which is the DLT based assets, to create their central bank digital currency, which is in a synthetic form. So that is why they are looking here. The synthetic central bank digital currency envisions private sector firms issuing digital coins to the public, because in the alternative scenario, they were actually looking to directly issue that to the public, which have a lot of conflict of interest between the banks itself. So that is not actually going to happen. Instead, they'll actually support the innovation through fintechs and banks. So when they are going through the fintechs, the accounts can be held at banks too. Just the intermediary interface in the computer will be provided by a software company which works with banks, and we know that the possibilities are high that it will be the RippleNet software. Now, keeping all those what we discussed about the central bank digital currency and the synthetic, or let it be the hybrid, this is for sure, right? We just saw that it will be 100% backed by the assets of central bank. So this is what central bank reserves is. It can be whatever they are printing as money, because they print now like a lot. For Fed, they are kind of eyeing 10 trillion now. They are just expanding their balance sheets. So the central bank reserves like cash are therefore a risk-free form of money as they consider. However, unlike cash, they are transferable digitally. That is the central bank digital currency, right? So reserves are interest bearing and are remunerated at the central bank deposits rate. So when you actually look at this, you can directly see that all assets which are acquired by the central banks will be supported in the new form. So the value or the market cap, which majority says no, this particular token can't actually go above $100, it won't be possible, there is no much amount of money in the world. Just try to correct yourself, go to central banks, look at what are the assets which they are owning, and as of now they are just expanding the balance sheet like crazy. So in that particular way, you can't actually say that this token won't go around 1,000, this token won't go around 10,000, because if they are actually eyeing a token which is say 10,000 or 20,000, say for example it is BTC, and if the central banks want to reduce the usage of that thing and provide something better through them, which can go, say for example, even higher than that price, they will actually do that, because in this one, government has some kind of control, some level of control. Even if the token is issued by a private firm, they're actually working and issuing it based on the central bank assets. So they kind of have a control. Now, central bank is not one central bank, right? You have central banks in all the different countries. So if 30, 40, 50, 100 countries are actually coming up, say in the total 195, the initial adoption may be around first 50, first 40, I don't know, first 10, first 20. But even if it is the G20 coming up and saying we are going to do this, the total assets, total amount owned by the central bank won't be the size of their economies. Say the US is 20 trillion, China is 14, 15, 18 trillion, right? So even if they are actually looking at the assets, it will be massive. So if a token is coming up there, the price can actually instantly go up just by that news, because in the background this is happening. Now yes, when we see the glitches like $6 XRP, $12 XRP, $9,000 XRP, we all get confused. This may be someone selling BTC, this may be someone selling EOS, this may be someone selling the ETH. No, we actually don't know what it is, but keep in mind that the communications are happening in the background, and they are actually creating this infrastructure and doing their experimental work. Once they actually come out and state, yes, we have done this, this works, and this will be the system which general public will be using from tomorrow, think the price will shoot up like crazy. Everyone will actually come in, buy. So foreseeing this, say even if this is going to happen 10% of in the 10% of countries around the world, say 20, first 20, that's the G20, the price will be massively high. People will be coming in and buying crazy. But keep in mind, at that time, these coins which are there to support the central bank reserves won't be directly accessible for the general public to buy. If it is in that way, it will be different. Now yes, it will be kind of like the government bonds. You can go buy that directly from the central bankers or the bankers. You can actually do that, but it will be based on their description. They will say what conditions are they, blah 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 blah. But at the same time, now the prices are too low and no one is actually foreseeing this particular event and accumulating. And if we are able to do that, which we are, it's just the decision whether you want to do that or not. I'm actually preparing my portfolio for this. Even if it is coming in next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't care, because this is actually coming. Even if, say for example, in the XRP ledger, they are issuing a new token for this, that will still be based on XRP. And then it connects back to the central bank reserves, where you have the gold assets, all the different assets, real estate, whatever let it be. Now, when we have all of this information, I would like to connect it to the other side. Questions are being asked, say, why is this not happening immediately? So this video from the XRP Yo-Yo actually shows that. I'll play this.
When you're basically betting the guts of firms on the outcome here. So the types of systems we're talking about, that they're not apps, that you roll out on a cell phone. These are massive post-trade processing processes involving hundreds, if not thousands, of personnel, trillions of dollars notional in any given day. These things are moving, they're like large vehicles moving at large speed, and messing with them is risky and dangerous. So it's that reason why there, in the grand scheme of things, there hasn't been a gigantic wave of investment in dollar terms relative to the size of some of these institutions, but nonetheless, it's not nothing. And there's no doubt that the most forward-thinking, most innovative firms that have the track record over the years of most successfully reinventing themselves, defending market share, winning market share, are the ones that are spending the most time on this. And I don't think that's at all a coincidence.
I kind of completely agree with her. That's not a coincidence, right? When the giant firms who actually foresee that this is happening and who have the experience of doing that is doing that, it's not a coincidence. And that's why I'm in this. That's why we are in this, right, as a community. And as she was discussing, when this is moving like crazy like this without much of a regulatory clarity, at least in the front side, that's the reason why majority of the investors are not actually jumping in. Another tweet from a real XRP boy here. This is kind of a bit old one, but when you actually look at the grand scheme of things and read this, there is some connection between there. Some even believe, now this is from David Rockefeller, and talking about, the one world currency, one world order, that shit. And he's stating one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I'm proud of it. And read bottom, IMF calls for a dollar alternative. Okay, but that's really early in 2011. So when you actually see these stuffs, you should start thinking. And while you're thinking, you should be connecting it with all the information which you actually have. Now, this is a previous article from CoinDesk in 2014, and now highlighted by Real XRP Boy. Shout out to him. So he's actually showing this, the early stages, because it aims to build the best global payment protocol. This is from Chris Larsen. You need a big team, and now they have a big team. Ripple is a big team now. In Bitcoin world, I'd say a lot of value is going into mining, whereas we are focusing that on monetization towards building this team, because they are eyeing global protocol. Now that was back in 2014 and showing the Lightspeed Ventures, Google Ventures, everything coming into this, who actually have this ability and experience of foreseeing this thing and pushing it to the future. Now there are still individuals who still believe that the legacy system, the legacy system of the crypto is gonna endure. This is what the Business Insider thinks. Now the words are directly from Jim Ricketts, but what you have to think is he's an investor, and the investing world as of now actually thinks in this direction.
Very steeply, by the way. This thing is completely non-sustainable. There have been the amount of electricity power. The reason the Bitcoin miners are in China is because they burn coal, pollute the air, and have subsidized electricity, or they're in Iceland because it's so cold it reduces their cooling costs for all the computing power. Right now, they're using Bitcoin miners every year using as much electricity as the country of Nigeria, a country of 90 million people. Before long, they'll be using as much as Japan, third largest economy in the world. That's not going to happen. You can say that's a simple extrapolation, but there's no way the Bitcoin industry is going to be allowed to use as much electricity as the country of Japan, but that's how much you need to mine the Bitcoin. So they're going to hit a wall in terms of total Bitcoin output. At that point, the miners have no incentive to mine. So who's going to validate the blockchain? Are they going to charge a fee? Well, fine. That sounds like Wells Fargo. That's what banks do.
Now that kind of go towards the statement of David Schwartz, who just stated no incentive is the best incentive. Now you should actually understand who is working behind the New World Order system. Now, maybe conspiracy, but everything is kind of leading towards that. We don't care, because unless the sky is going to fall down, we really don't care, because we are already invested in this and continually accumulating this particular asset, and based on all this information, we are happy to do that. At least I'm so happy and glad I started researching about XRP 3 years back, and I've started accumulating 3 years back. I'm really happy to continue to do so unless this event happens. So say for example, it's the mainstream and the price is sky high. If you're getting value out of the content, please do support the channel, hit the like button and the subscribe button, followed by the bell notification icon to get notified about the future videos.